I knew something was off when Sharon from HR actually flinched after I asked if we were allowed to talk about our salaries. Not scream, not protest, just asked. We were in one of those faux cheerful engagement sinks, the kind with fruit trays and jargon about emotional throughput when I raised my hand and asked, are we allowed to talk about salaries with coworkers? Casual, curious, not accusatory. Hell, I even smiled. Her face went stiff like she'd bit into a lemon rind. Then she said it flat and final, we don't discuss salaries here, just like that, like the topic was radioactive, like I'd farted during the Pledge of Allegiance. And in that moment, the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. You could feel it. You could hear the eye contact breaking. The marketing guy with the vest looked at his shoes like I'd said a slur. I half expected the fire alarm to go off and sprinkler rain to fall from the ceiling as corporate tried to wash my sin away. Over the next few days, everything felt off. A weird pause when I entered the kitchen. Slack threads dying mysteriously after I commented. One of the engineers, Lewis, who used to ask me about my fantasy football picks, avoided eye contact like I was an exorcist. And okay, before we go deeper down this rabbit hole of office sabotage and federal justice, let me just say this. If you're listening to this and you haven't hit that follow or like button yet, do me a solid. It really helps the team keep putting these stories out, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for what comes next. This isn't some found her phone under the couch story. This is a slow-motion boardroom implosion with extra spice. Anyway, back to my sudden corporate invisibility. At first, I thought I was overreacting. Maybe HR was just touchy about sensitive topics. Maybe I'd caught Sharon on a bad week. Maybe the cheese cubes weren't cubed enough for her spiritual wellness or whatever. But then came the first red flag, an actual red flag. Friday morning, I opened our project tracker and found 2 of my deliverables reassigned. No heads up. No email, just gone. My name erased like I never touched them. Then Monday, I wasn't invited to our usual ops stand-up. Lewis texted me after, they said you weren't needed. Just a format change, prob nothing, but I wasn't stupid. I'd been there 6 years, I'd onboarded half the team. If anything, I was the damn format. Things got worse, subtler. I got added to meaningless wellness meetings. One-on-ones turned into HR surveillance sessions where they smiled while writing everything down. And the Slack messages, they had that weird digital stillness, like when you walk into a room and everyone pretends they weren't just talking about you. Even the interns looked skittish. That's when a junior dev, bless his caffeinated little soul, slipped. We were in the break room and he whispered, they're watching your Slack, just so you know. I stared at him. He shrugged, popped open his La Croix and backed out like he'd just confessed to murder. At that point, the fog lifted. They weren't just being awkward. I'd been marked, labeled, branded, and all because I asked a question they didn't want answered, so I stopped trying to be nice. I stopped waving to Sharon in the hallway. I stopped making small talk with people who'd already written me off like a broken office chair. Instead, I opened a private folder in my cloud drive and titled it Equity Watch. Then I started pulling threads, salary logs, comp change reports, bonus structures tucked behind performance reviews, anything I could access without a password request. I knew the terrain. I'd helped build the dam system. They thought I'd take the hint and shut up. Instead, I started listening more carefully, and what I heard was the sound of cracks forming under marble. You don't always hear the building fall. Sometimes it groans first. The day I knew it wasn't paranoia was the day my own project vanished from under me. Not some side task or shared deliverable. My project. A dashboard rollout I'd been leading for 3 months, suddenly reassigned to Colin, the same Colin who once accidentally emailed a quarterly review to the entire sales team with the subject line, "Let's lie prettier this time." No warning, no explanation. I logged in Monday morning and poof, my name was gone from the project sheet. The JIRA tickets had been moved, ownership flipped, and someone had the gall to keep my documentation intact like I was a ghost consultant. I forwarded the change to my boss, Karen with a Q, asking for clarification. She replied 3 hours later with a one-liner, realignment based on bandwidth. Thanks for your flexibility. Flexibility? Lady, I could bend into a pretzel and you'd still find a way to sit on me. Then came the calendar games. Meetings I'd been on for years, weekly ops huddles, postmortems, cross-departmental planning calls, started disappearing from my calendar like I'd never existed. I'd walk past the glass-walled conference rooms and see my team gathered, all hunched over spreadsheets I built while I stood outside like a divorced dad at his kid's recital. The worst part? Nobody said a word, not even Lewis. Not even Julie, who once cried in the bathroom stall while I covered for her missed deadline. The silence was surgical, coordinated, corporate ostracism disguised as workflow realignment. It reached a head on a Thursday when I swung by the micro kitchen and caught Mateo, one of the junior devs I'd mentored, grabbing a granola bar like he was robbing the place. I said, "You guys heading into the quarterly review?" I didn't see the invite. He paused, blinked twice, and said in a half-whisper, "They're watching your Slack messages now." Just like that. No lead-in, no warning. He looked like he regretted saying it the moment it left his mouth. Then he darted off like he'd just confessed to hiding state secrets. I went back to my desk slowly and sat down. That phrase echoed like a broken smoke alarm in my skull. They're watching your Slack messages now, for asking a question. For asking? That's when it hit me. I wasn't an employee anymore, I was a risk profile. A pending case. A file in some internal tracking spreadsheet labeled engagement concerns. I opened my personal notebook, the one I used for real notes, the one with the creased edges and faded post-its, and I turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote in all caps, Operation, Paper Trail. No more smiling at HR. No more asking for clarification. No more benefit of the doubt. I'd seen enough whispers, enough calendar scrubs, enough Slack conversations that ended with let's take this offline. I wasn't documenting out of revenge. I was documenting to survive. You spend 6 years in ops and you learn to follow the flow of information like a plumber tracing a leak. Pay schedules, bonus bands, job grade ladders. The language is always sanitized, market adjustment, equity rebalancing, performance realignment. But the smell? The smell is always rot, so I started collecting. Screenshots, exported CSVs, a strange bonus payout labeled Q4 adjusted equity reconcile that went to 3 executives after we missed revenue goals. I bookmarked links, downloaded logs, renamed files to look like vendor contracts. Everything got backed up to an encrypted cloud drive under the name Old Recipes Grandma. Let them subpoena that. And the deeper I dug, the more absurd it got. I found a male coworker at my same level, same title, fewer responsibilities, making $19,400 more. Another one had received a retention bonus during the same quarter. They canceled our department's team building budget. I cross-checked contractor payments and found 2 shell LLCs getting recurring consulting fees with vague descriptions like admin interface synergy sync. Admin, interface, synergy, sync. I laughed so hard I almost threw my back out. The company wasn't just underpaying women. It was rewarding the people doing it. And if I saw it, someone else could too. I stopped going to engagement syncs. I stopped reacting in Slack. I let them think I was fading out. Meanwhile, I was building a war chest, quietly, methodically, like a woman setting fire to a field one blade of grass at a time. I wasn't just watching the system anymore. I was archiving its sins. The first time I saw the anomaly, I thought it was a typo. A misplaced zero, maybe. But when I double-checked the data export, the numbers didn't lie, they never do. One of my peers, Tyler, same title, same responsibilities, same hire date even, was pulling in $26,000 more a year than I was. Not counting his discretionary bonus. That part nearly made me choke on my coffee. Because that bonus, it came from a budget code I recognized, vendor allocation, which meant it didn't come from payroll. It came from a shell contractor account. I stared at that spreadsheet like it was a live grenade. I knew enough about how our systems talked to each other to see what they were doing, disguising internal bonuses as third-party consulting fees. Why? To skirt equity audits. To keep the official salary data clean. A perfect way to funnel rewards without leaving fingerprints. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Tyler negotiated better. Maybe I missed a pay cycle adjustment. But the next name I checked, Illy, another senior analyst, showed the same pattern. Base pay higher than mine, bonus code identical, shell account payout. And then another. And another. Every one of them a man. Every one of them listed under a performance metric that didn't exist in any of our published policy docs. My fingers started shaking. I'd seen payroll irregularities before, clerical stuff, late reimbursements, but this was deliberate. Someone had built an invisible pipeline for selective enrichment, and it ran right through HR's supposedly automated systems, so I started digging. Deeper, quietly. Late nights after sign-off, I'd VPN into the archive server and pull monthly comp snapshots. I'd compare metadata timestamps, revision logs, and digital signatures. Most people saw salary data as rows and numbers. I saw tracks, patterns, fingerprints of the same 2 or 3 admins making subtle edits at quarter end. It was almost elegant in its simplicity. One file labeled Vendor Payout Q2, XLSX. Inside, 6 transactions to companies with names like Sierra Apex Consulting and Velvet Harbor Systems, both listed at the same mailing address as our downtown office. That was the moment my confusion burned off like fog under a blowtorch. This wasn't sloppy accounting. This was a machine, and they'd fired me for asking about fairness. I opened my encrypted cloud drive, the one hidden under Old Recipes Grandma, and created a new subfolder, Shell Audit. Every file I found went in there. Copies of pay logs, invoice PDFs, metadata exports, and screenshots of the audit trail, just in case anyone tried to wipe the evidence later. I even saved the timestamps separately, handwritten in my notebook. Paper still tells the truth when hard drives don't. The more I found, the colder I got. There was no moral outrage left, just precision. I'd always been the quiet one, the one who fixed other people's mistakes without demanding credit. Now I was turning that same precision on them. I was cataloging every irregularity like a coroner examining a corpse. One night around 11 p.m., as I sat staring at my monitor in the blue glow of my living room, I caught my reflection in the screen. I looked calm, too calm. That scared me a little. Because I realized I wasn't shocked anymore, I was methodical. I was past hurt, past disbelief. I was studying them like a system to be debugged. And when you debug something long enough, you eventually find the root cause. By the end of that week, I'd mapped the entire skeleton of the fraud: bonuses laundered through shell vendors, manipulated comp logs, HR collusion disguised as equity reconciliation. It wasn't just illegal, it was stupid. Lazy even, the kind of arrogance that comes from thinking nobody's watching. But someone was, me. I backed up the files to 3 separate locations, one on a private drive, one on an encrypted flash hidden in a box of baking soda in my pantry, and one printed, yes, printed, tucked inside an old binder marked 2019 taxes. If they came from my laptop, I'd still have the paper trail. I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and whispered to no one, so this is what rot looks like up close. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. The calendar invite said check-in, wellness, and support. That alone should have tipped me off. The phrase oozed passive-aggressive HR lavender oil, but I accepted it anyway. I wanted to see how far they'd go, to give them just enough rope to prove what I already knew. It was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I wore black, not for drama, for war. The conference room smelled like old carpet glue and betrayal. Sharon from HR was already seated, flanked by a new face, a man in a too-tight blazer, probably flown in from legal to witness my public execution. They both smiled, thin, untrustworthy. The kind of smile you'd expect from someone who euthanizes office goldfish. "Hi, Barbara," Sharon chirped, gesturing to the empty chair across the table like I was being welcomed to a Last Supper. "Thanks for coming. We just wanted to check in, see how things have been feeling for you lately." I sat. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. The man, Brent, according to his laminated badge, took over. "There have been some concerns brought to our attention regarding your recent behavior." "Concerns?" I repeated. "Yes," Sharon nodded. "We've received feedback that your presence has become difficult. There's a sense that your attitude may be impacting team morale." Team morale? What a beautiful, shapeless weapon. You can carve anyone to pieces with it and never leave a bruise. Brent added. "You understand you've had questions about company compensation policies?" "I asked a question during a meeting," I said. Calm, measured, and never received a policy document in response. They didn't respond to that. Just exchanged a glance that said, "This won't be easy, but let's push through the script." Then came the envelope, thin, white, no weight to it. Sharon slid it across the table like it contained an allergy report instead of a livelihood. "You've made the decision to terminate your employment, effective immediately," she said with a rehearsed softness like that would dull the blade. I looked down at the envelope, didn't touch it. No severance. No misconduct accusation, just effective immediately. No appeal, no HR follow-up, just bye. And the best part, they thought this would be the moment I'd break. That I'd cry, beg, rage, give them something messy to point at. Something to justify what they were doing. But I just sat there. Then I said, "Noted." That's it. One word, no emotion, no retaliation, just acknowledgement. Sharon blinked, thrown off. Brent shifted in his seat. They weren't prepared for stillness. They expected blood. I stood. Took the envelope, not because I needed it, but because it was a receipt. Then I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. No one looked up. Not even the receptionist, who suddenly found her screen very interesting. I didn't take my plants, didn't say goodbye. I'd already backed up everything important. The ride down the elevator was silent. 33 floors of reflection in brushed steel. By the time I hit the lobby, the humiliation had already started to transmute, melted down, and reforged into something colder. Harder. They thought this was the end. They didn't realize I'd already begun. 2 blocks away, in the corner of a coffee shop I'd been using as my off-site ops bunker, opened my laptop and connected to the encrypted drive. There it all was, waiting, organized, time-stamped, untouched. They fired me because they thought I was a threat. They had no idea how right they were. There's something terrifyingly calm about filling out a federal whistleblower report. You expect your hands to shake, your breath to catch. But mine didn't. I sat at my kitchen table, next to a cold cup of coffee and a candle that had long since burned out. The windows were closed. The laptop screen glowed like a confession booth, and the cursor blinked, patient and silent. I started with the Department of Labor. The form asked for the basics: my name, the company's name, the dates. Then the real part: nature of the misconduct. I paused for half a second, then began typing like I was carving the story into stone. Systematic wage discrimination against female employees occupying analyst, senior analyst, and operations roles. Multiple instances of unequal compensation for equal work, corroborated by internal payroll and equity allocation documents. Repeated routing of discretionary bonuses through false contractor accounts registered to shell LLCs, 2 of which share addresses with the company's regional headquarters. Unauthorized bonus distributions issued outside of standard compensation frameworks to select male employees. Payroll misrepresentation conducted via vendor expense accounts. Possible violations of the Equal Pay Act and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Sections 802 and 806. Evidence of internal document tampering, including manipulation of metadata and audit trail obfuscation. Retaliation following inquiry regarding salary transparency. Termination issued under vague claims of team morale concerns after formal request for written compensation policy was ignored. Internal chat logs monitored without consent post-inquiry. I attached 47 documents. I labeled every single one. Then I filed the same report with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Same structure. Different fangs. Because this wasn't just wage theft, it was investor fraud. Misreporting payroll liabilities during an IPO runway? That's a red flag they can't ignore. I cited the specific policies they claim to uphold in the S1 draft, pasted the language about inclusive compensation models and transparent equity frameworks. Then I provided the logs proving it was a lie. I invoked whistleblower protections under both agencies. Clean, legal, bulletproof. Then I hit submit. The screen shifted. A message appeared, your report has been received. A federal investigator may contact you for follow-up. Do not discuss your report with any representative of the company you are reporting. A confirmation number, a date, a timestamp. I screenshotted it, printed it, saved it twice. Then I sat back in the chair and let the silence expand. This wasn't anger anymore. This wasn't revenge. This was justice, coded into a PDF and fired into the bloodstream of two of the most powerful regulatory agencies in the country. I didn't post about it, didn't call anyone, didn't text a single coworker. I let the quiet grow teeth. Because here's the thing no one tells you about a whistleblower report. It doesn't shout, it whispers. To the right people, in the right rooms. While the company parties upstairs, the floorboards rot. They think they've silenced you, that you've walked away. Broken and small. But really, you're just standing outside with the match, waiting for the first whiff of smoke to drift into their champagne. Back at headquarters, they were celebrating like they'd already rung the NASDAQ bell. I watched it unfold from a safe digital distance. LinkedIn updates, Slack screenshots forwarded by quietly loyal ex-colleagues, even a press blurb bragging about disruption in legacy operations workflows and cutting-edge equity transparency. That last part made me snort hard enough to choke on my tea. They'd hired one of those high-gloss consulting firms. You know the type? PowerPoint deep thinkers with more acronyms than ethics. Guys who charge six figures to tell you your workflows need elasticity. The kind of consultants who spend half their time installing espresso bars and the other half inventing new buzzwords to mask rot. Photos went up on social. Leadership sipping cocktails in rooftop bars, toasting pre-valuation targets and organic multiplier uplift. HR even hosted a Wellness Wednesday to boost morale after firing me for hurting morale. Irony doesn't come in thicker slices. They had no idea. None. But then the hairline cracks began to show. Not loudly. Not with sirens, just oddities. An auditor, contracted for the IPO readiness review, asked for a monthly contractor payout log. Nothing strange on the surface, until you realized that specific log hadn't been requested in 4 years. Then legal pinged finance with a request for original metadata on 6 executive bonus records. Original metadata, not PDFs, not summaries. They wanted timestamps. That's not casual. That's someone reading too carefully. They started reviewing deferred compensation disclosures and equity reconciliation memos, very same terms I'd used in my report. Coincidence? Sure, and maybe a raccoon rewrote their compensation system too. Meanwhile, I was doing fine. Better than fine, honestly. Remote job. Clean pay bands published for every position, every level. No one watching my Slack. No one scheduling check-in ambushes. I made coffee when I wanted. Wore sweatpants to meetings. Laughed without looking over my shoulder. Sometimes I'd get texts from old coworkers. Little flare signals. Did you ever get your bonus? Are you the reason legal keeps asking about 2022 Q4? We had a whole HR training today on whistleblower protections. Law? I never replied. I didn't need to. They were guessing, piecing things together like kids catching whispers of monsters under the bed. But the real monster wasn't hiding. It was already inside the house, papered over with fake metrics and forged morale. Leadership kept smiling, at least in public. They posted about closing Series C with confidence. Hired a VP of people. Gave Sharon from HR a Compliance Excellence Award, which I genuinely hope came with a fruit basket full of poison. I imagined the boardroom, same stale air, same glass walls, same performative laughter. They thought the machine was humming, that everything ugly had been purged with my departure. But underneath it all, the foundation was humming too. Different kind of hum. The kind you hear before a transformer blows. Because every file I sent, every timestamp I archived, every metadata tag I preserved, it wasn't just evidence. It was a countdown. And now someone else, someone inside, was reading it. Not because I shouted, not because I posted a TikTok crying in my car, because I whispered it directly to the ones who had the power to make them bleed quietly. And I could feel it coming. The slow, creeping shift, the weight of pressure building behind closed legal doors. They were still drinking champagne. But the floor beneath them? Yeah, that was starting to creak. The first real tremor came quietly, like most disasters do. They were supposed to have an investor call on a Thursday, some pre-IPO cheerleading session with PowerPoints, buzzwords, and barely concealed greed. The kind where the CFO dazzles with projections cooked to perfection, and no one asks why the frosting smells like gasoline. But then the invite got pulled. Unexpected delay, the email read. 3 words, no context. Sent at 8:14 a.m. That same afternoon, a junior finance associate, Emily, 2 years in, smart as hell, abruptly resigned. No farewell lunch, no LinkedIn essay, just gone. Her desk emptied before lunch. Her Slack deactivated by 3 p.m. I didn't hear it from her, but someone else did. One of my old ops colleagues texted me a screenshot of the internal whisper chain. Emily knew too much about the Q1 bonus recs. She told HR she wasn't going to jail for someone else's mistake. Did you hear legal asked for her access logs? I read it twice, smiled once, and went back to my spreadsheets. See, while the house I used to work in was starting to sweat, I was sitting in a glass-walled office of a new company, a real one, where my salary was printed in the job listing before I even applied. Full transparency. Level 4 Ops Analyst, $96,000 base with structured reviews, $5,000 bonus band, no negotiation games. Everyone saw the same sheet. Everyone knew where they stood. Felt like walking barefoot after years in steel-toe boots. My boss was a human being. The HR team spoke like humans, not soft-core legal threats in yoga pants. I got a welcome kit with a handwritten note, not a wellness survey from hell. And yet, even from that clean, peaceful desk, I could still feel the static humming through the old company's walls, because the silence on their end had become too quiet. The kind that isn't restful, it's held breath. Then came the slip. One of the executives, someone from the sales side, not smart enough to keep his voice down, was overheard muttering to a team lead, "Is this about the old comp logs?" He didn't say it in a meeting. He said it in the hallway, but those words traveled faster than a fire in a dry forest. Suddenly, you could see it in their faces, the look of people who realized there was a wolf and it had already chewed through the fence. Board meetings got moved. Sharon from HR, Miss Morale is everything, started canceling office hours and looked like she hadn't slept in a week. One of the co-founders deleted their Twitter entirely. The public face, still flawless, still the same recycled LinkedIn posts about culture and gratitude, but inside people were sweating through their dress shirts. The fuse was almost gone, and I wasn't watching with popcorn. I was watching with peace, not because I hated them, not even because they fired me, but because when a system is built on rot, the most ethical thing you can do is expose it to daylight. And the sun was coming up. So while they whispered, delayed, and pretended everything was fine, I started each morning the same way. Open laptop, stretch, check the news, smile, because I knew what was coming next. And this time, it wasn't a delay. It was the sound of a locked door being opened by someone with a badge. The boardroom was bathed in late afternoon light, the kind that makes rich people feel invincible. Leather chairs, custom glass table, sparkling water bottles arranged like trophies. The CEO, let's call him Doug because of course his name is Doug, stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up like a startup messiah preaching through a storm. "Look, I've spoken to legal," Doug said, voice smooth as gym-polished mahogany. "The reports are overblown." Some noise from a disgruntled former analyst trying to stir up attention. "It'll pass. They always do." He chuckled as he said it, laughed actually. The kind of laugh that's just one drink shy of dangerous. The CFO tried to mirror it, but it landed flat. Her smile looked stapled on. Someone at the far end of the table coughed into their fist. "Barbara," Doug continued, grinning like a man who still thought he owned the narrative. She was smart, quiet, never caused a stir until suddenly she decided to play detective. You know the type. Probably thinks she's Aaron Brockovich with a Google Drive. A few board members chuckled, dry, performative, the kind of sound you make when you're not sure if you're supposed to agree. Then it happened. Reception called up, but no one answered. Downstairs, the front desk staff had stopped chewing gum mid-pop. Because 2 men had just entered the building, mid-40s, black suits, no small talk. One flashed a badge, the other handed over a file folder. Calm, professional, like this was their third takedown of the week. They didn't stop for coffee, they didn't look around. They moved like people with a schedule. The elevator dinged. Doug was still talking, still on his soapbox. "We'll address it in our S1, sure, but I've been through this before. I've had worse. These things flare up and ding." The conference room door clicked open, not knocked, opened. And suddenly the air was gone. 2 men stepped inside. No smiles, no apologies, just the sterile chill of authority. "Douglas Worth?" the taller one asked. Doug froze, mouth still half open like he'd forgotten how words worked. The agent held up a document, 3 pages, clipped neatly, the top stamped in red. "Federal Asset Freeze Order. My name is Agent Ramirez. This is Agent Lowell. We're with the Department of Labor and the Sex Enforcement Division. Effective immediately, we are freezing all corporate and subsidiary accounts pending review of Whistleblower Report 408 to 21C. The CFO made a noise, somewhere between a gasp and a dry heave. Ramirez continued. "Per federal whistleblower protections, the subject of the report cannot be contacted, surveilled, or retaliated against in any way." Nobody moved. Doug's hands were still on the table. His knuckles went white. Behind them, the digital dashboard mounted to the wall began to flicker. The company's internal finance display, real-time dashboards that showed everything from revenue to cash on hand, froze. Then error codes started pouring in. One board member, a woman in a lavender blazer, leaned back slowly and said in a whisper, "Oh my God." Doug tried to speak but coughed instead. And outside, in a cafe 2 blocks away, I stirred a packet of raw sugar into my coffee and refreshed my email. One new message. Subject, enforcement initiated body, we've begun. Thank you for your cooperation. I leaned back in my seat, took a sip, let the warmth settle, no press, no social media war, no scandalous podcast, just truth moving quietly. And finally delivered. Agent Ramirez didn't flinch when he laid the second document on the table. A plain manila folder, no theatrics, no preamble. Inside, a warrant, signed and sealed. 3 federal stamps. One for the Department of Labor, one from the SEC, one from the U.S. District Court. This includes authority to seize physical and digital records, restrict outgoing financial transactions, and lock employee compensation structures pending a federal audit, Ramirez said, calmly, like he was reading off a lunch receipt. Doug, still standing, still trying to project the same alpha in a hoodie energy he always used to charm investors, looked like he'd been hit in the throat with a frozen salmon. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out, not even a stutter, just silence. Agent Lowell leaned in, close enough for only the front half of the table to hear. Her report triggered an investigation. Your assets are now frozen pending federal review. And that was when the CFO dropped her pen. It didn't clatter, it just rolled, slowly. The only sound in the room. She tried to speak, tried to ask something, but her voice cracked halfway out and died. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, but Ramirez raised a hand. No calls, no messages. All devices remain in this room until our forensic team arrives. You'll be briefed on your rights shortly. The room began to cave in on itself. The tension shifted from stunned to suffocating. Sharon from HR, she of soft-voiced discipline and let's circle back, was sheet white, linking like her body was about to reject its own nervous system. One hand clutched her smartwatch like she was trying to slow her pulse with Bluetooth. The other gripped the table for dear life. The screen behind them, the sleek, glass-encased financial dashboard that normally flickered with funding updates and performance metrics, glitched once. Then again, then it froze. Access denied. Lines of red text scrolled over the dashboard like a Vegas sign caught mid-meltdown. System override, all accounts locked, federal hold in place, no one spoke. Not a single sound. Even the air vents seemed to pause. Doug finally sat, not by choice. His legs gave out under him. The boardroom chair creaked like it didn't want to hold the weight of his failure. Ramirez turned once, looking at each face around the table. You'll remain here until our team arrives. If you need to use the restroom, you'll be escorted. Then they stepped out, closing the door behind them. It didn't slam, it didn't click. But it sealed. 2 blocks away, I was stirring a second coffee. Same cafe, same corner table. The barista knew me now, called me B. I refreshed my email again, there it was. Subject, enforcement status confirmed body, we've begun enforcement. Thank you for your thorough documentation. You were right. I stared at the screen, not smiling, not gloating, just still. Because this wasn't a win you celebrate. This was a fire you start because no one would listen when you whispered smoke. They thought I was invisible. They thought they could box me out and delete my name and rewrite the narrative. But the thing about being underestimated, they never see you coming until the floor disappears beneath them. And now, the system they built on silence and arrogance was gagged by federal tape. The men who clinked glasses over stolen bonuses were locked out of their own empire. And me, I just sat back, sipped my coffee, and let the silence finish what I started. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.